promoting responsibility, respect, and compromise among opposing political parties and views. For the next few minutes, we're going to be discussing civil discourse. Hello and welcome to Comcast Newsmakers. I'm Candace Kelly, and I am joined by Kyrsten Sinema, Arizona State Senator and State Director for the Young Elected Officials Network. Thank you so much for being with us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Now, especially in the state of Arizona, civil discourse is obviously a topic that you have been talking about for quite a while, and even before the shooting of Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords. Tell me a little bit about what you want to explain to the public, that you want to put on the agenda for discussion.
Well, what I really want to support is the not very radical idea that we can have a civil discourse around politics. And that indeed, if we were to have a civil discourse between people who may have differing ideas, not only can we find compromise, but sometimes even consensus, and restore faith in the idea of American democracy. Really get people engaged in the process again and help people understand that democracy should be for them, not something to be bandied about on Fox News or MSNBC, but a true process where we make public policy.
And you mentioned those stations and just many different outlets out there set it up so that we have these factions, and that's really how we function. I'm wondering, as a senator, do you think that there are things that you've done in order to allow this type of civil discourse to take place? Have you seen some things that you've put into work really rise to the level of expectation that you've had for things to work out?
Well, this is actually a lesson I had to learn myself as a young elected official. When I first got into office, I was taught to do what we see on television, to have one side against the other, demonize each other, and it just didn't work for me. As a member of the minority in Arizona, what I realized was that I needed people who had beliefs different than myself to get things done. So when we push aside that expectation of polarity and divisiveness and really just seek to make friends with those who are different than us, we find that we have a lot more in common than we do different from each other.
And when you talk about making friends, do you literally mean going up to them and talking to them, or sending them something, I don't know, a note out of the ordinary? How do you do that?
Well, the first thing I learned was to listen. In fact, I wrote a book about this, my own experience of learning to listen to people who were different than me and see what was that common ground that we shared. What values do we hold in common? The truth is that most Americans share the same values. We may articulate them differently, but by listening to each other and finding respect for each other, we can see that our values really are the same, and that we can find solutions together.
The book that you mentioned, it's called Unite and Conquer, and I think that's really interesting because you wrote it long before the shooting, I believe, right?
Oh yes, I published it in 2009.
Yeah, so what prompted you to do it at that time?
You know, when I was first elected, as I mentioned earlier, I was kind of taught to buy into this polarity and divisiveness, and what I found was it wasn't working for me. I wasn't achieving the things I wanted to achieve for my constituents, and I wasn't advancing the agenda that I cared deeply about for my community. It was only when I learned to do what I was taught in kindergarten, which was make friends, listen to other people, and find shared values, that's when I found success. So the book is really my story and the story of others learning to do just that in public policy.
Yeah, and I can imagine that with this type of attitude that we can possibly prevent people from going out and shooting people that they believe are from a different group. And I'm wondering if that's, you know, part of your goal in doing this, so that hopefully everyone will just be on one accord so that we can all just understand each other and be really nice to each other, because this really is a society, when you turn on TV, people just aren't nice, and that sells.
Well, and what's unfortunate is I don't think that's reflective of what America really is. We are a community of very diverse people, but always people who've had respect for each other and a willingness to make it work, even through our differences. So what we need to do is demand that our elected officials behave like Americans behave, where with our neighbors and our friends in our community, we work out our differences and we do it peaceably, and we seek to find common ground, compromise, consensus, and really seeking to find the civil discourse that our country was founded on.
Right, because we have about 20 seconds left, and I've spoken to you before, and you said that it hasn't always been like this. It hasn't always been these factions so divisive.
That's right. You know, if you go back and study in the halls of Congress, even as recently as the 1950s and 1960s, members of the two parties would have strong debates on the floor, but have dinner with each other in the evening, visit with each other's families, and in the end, find compromise.
All right, a lot going on there, and a lot of things that have to be put together, and I thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for Comcast Newsmakers. I'm Candace Kelly.